inspired by real-life events. Narrator Samuel Carter woke up at 5:44 a.m. inside a dim hospital interrogation suite, with a detective placing a sealed evidence bag on the table and saying, "Your DNA was found at the scene of a political assassination attempt." And in that instant, his entire world collapsed, because just the night before, he was an emergency field medic attached to a private humanitarian security unit in Berlin, responding to protest zone injuries and coordinating medical evacuations. And now, he was being treated as the primary suspect in a high-profile attempted assassination of a government official he had never even met. And the first shock wasn't fear. It was disorientation so deep. It felt like reality itself had been edited overnight, because Samuel's entire identity was built around saving lives under chaos, not causing it. But now, every system record pointed toward him as the source of chaos, and within hours his access credentials were revoked. His contract terminated under emergency national security protocol, his apartment searched, and his name flagged in cross-agency intelligence logs as primary operational anomaly linked to targeted political breach event. And Samuel sat in the interrogation room, replaying fragments of the previous night, remembering smoke-filled streets, medical triage points, sirens, coordinated evacuation routes, and then a missing gap, an unexplained blackout window between 11:28 p.m. and 12:56 a.m., where all field communication logs showed his identifier initiating restricted access movement near a secure diplomatic zone. But he had no memory of entering that zone at all. And when investigators showed him thermal surveillance footage of a figure wearing medical field gear, moving through restricted corridors using his digital clearance token, Samuel immediately said, "That's not me. I never went there." But the intelligence officer replied flatly, "Your biometric authorization confirms presence." And that sentence shattered his understanding, because it meant physical truth no longer mattered. Only recorded system consensus mattered. And by sunrise, he was released under continuous surveillance orders, while international agencies had already internally classified him as a high-confidence insider infiltration vector. And outside the facility, Samuel stood under grey Berlin skies, watching emergency vehicles still moving through the city, as if nothing had changed, while his entire life had been rewritten inside classified coordination systems. And that night, he received a message through an encrypted humanitarian channel saying, "If you want the truth behind the diplomatic zone breach, come to abandoned Tiergarten service tunnels, no tracking devices." And despite knowing it could end his remaining freedom, he went, because once a person is already erased, caution stops being meaningful. And inside the tunnels, he met Dr. Helena Weiss, a former international crisis security analyst who specialized in covert breach reconstruction and identity manipulation in conflict zones. And she didn't ease into explanation. She immediately showed him reconstructed field coordination logs and said, "Your identity wasn't physically present. It was replicated through a live credential relay embedded inside the emergency response network." And Samuel instantly said, "Then I can prove I didn't do it." But Helena replied, "You're still thinking like someone inside moral logic, not like someone inside operational systems designed to assign responsibility faster than truth can form." And she explained that the assassination attempt wasn't a single action, but a coordinated multi-layer breach where field communication systems, medical clearance tokens, and restricted zone access were manipulated simultaneously to create a false operational footprint. and Samuel's identity had been chosen because his movement pattern naturally intersected high security zones during crisis response, making him statistically ideal for blame attribution under automated intelligence correlation models. And suddenly, the case wasn't just about an attack. It was about identity replication inside crisis infrastructure. And Helena offered him a choice: step away and allow international systems to finalize him as the operational perpetrator, or help her trace the credential relay chain before it was permanently sealed by intelligence containment protocols designed to close geopolitical incidents quickly, not truthfully. And Samuel stood in silence, listening to distant underground water echoes, thinking about the people he had saved over years, thinking about how quickly saving lives had turned into being accused of taking them, and thinking about how fragile identity becomes when systems prioritize resolution over accuracy. And finally he said, "If my identity has already been used to cause something I never did, then I have nothing left to protect except the truth itself." And that decision pulled him into a hidden layer of crisis infrastructure, where nothing remained stable, because every field log they analyzed was actively rewriting itself in real time. Every trace they followed kept shifting, as if the emergency network itself was reacting to their investigation. And soon they discovered the breach wasn't external sabotage, but internal privilege abuse involving a senior crisis coordination systems officer who had been rerouting field authentication relays across humanitarian and diplomatic response networks to mask unauthorized high-level movement operations. And Samuel's identity had been selected as the attribution anchor because it aligned perfectly with emergency response trust algorithms designed for rapid blame resolution during international incidents. And one night, while analyzing field coordination streams from a secured offline humanitarian node, Samuel saw something that completely broke his understanding. His credentials were actively authorizing restricted diplomatic corridor access in real time, while he was physically standing deep underground, disconnected from all systems. And Helena immediately said, "They are continuously simulating your identity inside the crisis network to preserve the official narrative structure." And Samuel realized he wasn't just being accused after the fact, he was being actively maintained as the cause inside a live operational reality. And pressure escalated rapidly as anonymous, intelligent wombs began appearing on secured devices, instructing him to cease investigation or face permanent international classification as a hostile operational entity. And sleep disappeared completely. Trust collapsed entirely, and even silence felt like monitored coordination space. And at one breaking point, Samuel whispered, "I thought emergency systems existed to protect truth during chaos, but maybe they exist to control what version of chaos is allowed to be remembered." And Helena replied, "Systems don't preserve truth, they preserve resolution." And that realization changed everything inside him, because he stopped trying to defend his identity and started focusing only on exposing the mechanism. And as they dug deeper, they uncovered encrypted relay nodes inside global crisis infrastructure, continuously generating synthetic operational logs to distribute blame across multiple humanitarian and diplomatic identity profiles. And Samuel's profile had been amplified as the central attributions point because it allowed fastest international case closure under crisis law frameworks. And when they finally compiled enough verified encrypted evidence to trigger international oversight escalation, containment protocols activated immediately attempting to erase operational logs across mirrored crisis response systems worldwide. And Helena said, "This is where most people disappear from history without ever being corrected." And Samuel replied, "Then I'll be the case they couldn't close cleanly." And together they transmitted secured evidence chains to independent international oversight channels, while preserving decentralized encrypted backups across isolated humanitarian nodes. And within days, the investigation escalated into a global crisis systems corruption probe, exposing identity replication abuse, emergency network manipulation, and coordinated political breach, framing across multiple jurisdictions. And arrests followed within high-level crisis coordination infrastructure. And when it was over, Samuel stood in the same city where everything had collapsed, watching emergency lights fade back into normal rhythm, realizing that the most dangerous part of modern systems is not that they fail, but that they can assign for failure to a single identity and make it operationally final. And a week later, when he met Helena for the last time under the quiet underground tunnel lights, she asked him, "What did this change in you?" And Samuel looked at the dim reflections on wet stone and said, "It showed me that identity inside systems is never truth. It is assignment." And she asked, "And what did you gain?" And after a long silence, he replied, "The understanding that truth doesn't survive inside control crisis systems. It survives only in the people who refuse to accept a version of reality written without their presence." And as he walked away alone into the cold, structured silence of the city above, he finally understood the deepest reality of his journey, that sometimes life doesn't destroy you with violence. It quietly assigns you a role in a story you never agreed to and waits to see if you accept it. But real survival begins the moment you refuse to live as a version of yourself that was written by something else.